Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I'm your host, Kevin Klein. I am joined, as always, by three of my Winnipeg Sun colleagues. Former Canadian radio talk show host Geoff Currier. We have Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba, and Lawrence Pinsky, KC, a former human rights adjudicator. You can read their columns anytime you like by visiting winnipegsun.com, and they've got new columns coming up this weekend. Let's move on to the big trade talk that's been going on. We of course had Doug Ford put out a TV commercial using Ronald Reagan's likeness or his voice without permission. So we don't know where that's going to go, but the TV commercial had certainly made a splash with Donald Trump and others. But I know a lot of people will get on it as, oh, Donald Trump is crazy, he's this, he's just reacting. But here's a clip that I found that I don't think a lot of Canadians are going to see, and I think we should talk about it. And it's from Kevin Hassett. Kevin Hassett is the Economic Council Director for the White House in the United States. He's been involved in a lot of these trade discussions, and he was stopped by a bunch of reporters. I'm not sure exactly where he is, but these reporters asked a few really good questions. The first one was it a knee-jerk reaction from the president about the TV commercial? And this is what Kevin Hassett had to say.
Mr. Hassett, on Canada, you said the president was frustrated, but is this just a knee-jerk reaction?
I think the frustration has built up over time. I've been involved in some of these negotiations, and the Canadians have been very difficult to negotiate with. And you look at all the countries around the world that we've made deals with, and the fact that we're now negotiating with Mexico separately reveals that it's not just about one ad, that there's frustration that's built up.
All right, so here's a gentleman, a representative of the United States involved in trade talks. He's very calm, cool, collected. He's not emotional, because when you negotiate from emotion, you lose. Ask any divorce attorney. Am I right, Lawrence? When you go from emotion, it can become really, really bad. This gentleman seems to be very professional and responding. What caught me about that is saying that this has kind of been ongoing with Canada. Is he said that Mexico and the United States are negotiating by themselves now, and they're close to a deal. What does that do for CUSMA? Because if CUSMA goes away, we're in bigger trouble than we could have imagined.
Well, not even Donald Trump can tear up CUSMA. The president doesn't have that authority.
But it's done in a year.
Yeah, that's the issue.
It's done in 1 year, and that's my fear, is that Donald Trump is there, and if they're making a separate deal with Mexico, and I'm them, and maybe you're trying to make a deal that will get rid of CUSMA anyways. Maybe that's the plan.
Do we really think that Donald Trump wants to damage his own country by ending trade deals with Canada, his biggest trading partner? I don't know that he necessarily wants to do that. Donald Trump doesn't see deals the way the rest of the world sees deals. Donald Trump doesn't believe that two parties can sit down and strike a deal where both parties walk away having benefited. For him, it's either I win or I lose, and he's going to win. That's his mentality in any deals. But Geoff, so we have to confront that.
But he's not at the table. Kevin Hassett and others are at the table. Kevin Hassett, here, I'll play this clip for you because
but Kevin Hassett is doing what Donald Trump instructs him to do.
I know, but listen, you can't just say that they're having all these problems, because let's listen to what Kevin Hassett said when a reporter asked him, "What's the problem with Canada?"
Mr. Hassett, just very quickly, what it has been so challenging about dealing with Canada in trade negotiations?
I guess the lack of flexibility and. Also, I would guess that leftover behaviors from like the Trudeau folks that can be very frustrating for people who are negotiating.
Okay, so he's saying that Canada has basically got the same kind of approach that they had under Trudeau, which we know wasn't working, and he's saying it's very hard to negotiate with Canadians. So Geoff, I ask you, are maybe we being, because if you look at it and you hear what he said, and it's true, they have signed a number of trade agreements with countries all across the world. And the reality is that any trade deal you sign today with this government in the United States will likely be gone after President Trump leaves office because a new president will come in. Why are we treating this like it's going to be a lifelong trade agreement that could damage the country? And why are we acting so bad that Hassett says we're just difficult to deal with?
Well, I'm not entirely convinced that Canada is 100% to blame on this, as you three guys are. I think when you're dealing with the United States and a Donald Trump administration, I don't think you can just, because I know you guys are all anti-liberal and anti-Carney, but I don't think you can just point at Mark Carney and say this is all his fault.
No,
I think it's much more complicated than that.
Jeff, of course it's complicated, but the reality is Carney came in on the promise that he's the guy to deal with, to make trade agreements with the United States. And he's been I wish he wasn't a failure. I wish he was a success, but he's been a complete failure in every single forum. And his strategies, including originally, if you remember this, he put a tariff on goods that actually flowed under the U.S. or CUSMA or whatever you want to call it. There are many different names for the treaty, but he taxed them, had to withdraw them. He tariffed, then he withdrew them. He didn't announce it. He did announce it. He obviously does not have a strategic bone in his cabinet. He doesn't know how to deal with the United States. I don't know who helped him at Brookfield Asset Management. It's clear to me that Mr. Flaherty is the one who got us out of 2008, not him, because he clearly, unless there's some other problem since then, because he cannot formulate a strategy.
Hang on a second. Hang on. But Brookfield under Carney and he's still, that's his company, right? Or he was a founder of it. He's still involved with them.
A founder.
Apparently hands off involved with them. But they did do a really good job with Trump. I'll play this clip for you right now.
States of America, we're going to be developing energy. We're going to be developing nuclear, semiconductors, and strengthening the entire domestic supply chain. So I'd like to kick it off, right? And the first company I'd like to announce is Westinghouse, which will invest up to $100 billion in nuclear reactors to restore U.S. energy dominance. And we have the co-signer is Bruce Flatt, who's the chairman and CEO of Brookfield Asset Management. So come on up.
No, but Kevin, that proves my point. What you just showed proves my point. The people around him and the people who are there now reached a great deal. And he didn't found Brookfield, but he was the CEO. He's gone. They reached a great deal. He's running Canada, cannot reach a deal with any country to save his life. And with the Americans in particular, look what Korea did. Look what Qatar did. Look what Mexico's done. They know how to deal with this guy. And we keep, complete failure. We keep failing on this time after time again. And it's not because I support Donald Trump. I support Canada, Jeff. But he's messing it up over and over and over again at the expense of Canadian families, now on the prairies with the peas issue, which we'll talk about later. That's the problem. He has to have a strategic approach. His government has to. And we failed. Our premier in Manitoba supported the nonsense with the ad. I can't believe how amateurish this is across the board.
I think when you have somebody like Kevin Hassett telling you that the Canadians are difficult to negotiate with, and Carney should be smart enough, and I think he's a very intelligent man. Let's look at his resume, his education. He's a very intelligent man. You change up the team. He likes hockey analogies. Put on a different power play. Change up the lines. Change your goalie. Do whatever you have to because we're not scoring any goals. Sometimes, as Jeff says, we score on our own net. But Carney is not doing what he told the Canadian people he could do. And now we're hearing more and more, as I told you guys months ago, that we were going to have an early election. We're hearing more and more, maybe an election around Christmas, right, Royce? So maybe Carney wants to keep this going.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to the early election thing, but I think Lawrence has used the exact right word. It's amateurish. This seems amateurish. The concern with the ad, the Ronald Reagan ad that Ford put out, it's not that it scuttled negotiations. I don't think it really did. I think that was an excuse. It's that it signaled that it seems like the Canadian negotiators aren't serious. They're not sincere. There's a kind of amateurishness to the negotiations, and that's being reflected in a lack of progress. And There's a good reason for that. It's that most Canadians so far are not being affected by these tariffs. There's select sectors in Canadian society, the auto workers, a few people that are being directly affected, but most Canadians aren't feeling the pain of these tariffs yet. And
Yeah.
so they're still elbows up. They're still excited about an ad that's going to, annoy Donald Trump. We got to put that stuff aside and get a deal because the consequences are 35% tariffs on some Canadian industries. The consequences are coming for us all and they're coming quickly. And so there needs to be more pressure on the government to negotiate sincerely, genuinely, and get a deal.
But also negotiate like adults. And you said something
Yeah,
earlier. You said the kids call it something when they believe it's all about them. What did you call that, Royce?
main character syndrome.
So Canada has a main character syndrome, right? We think that the United
Yes,
States should do
yes.
what we want them to do. Like we're going in there like these children saying, "Hey, you have to do this because we're your neighbor. We're the nice people. We're good people. We've done this, we've done that." But the United States isn't there anymore. And I look at it from a business perspective. If Kevin Hassett is telling you that we don't have the right team at the table, then we need to change that up. We need to put adults at the table, make an agreement, because the reality is this: the United States is our neighbor. They're our biggest trading partner. Do you really want to replace them with China? Or do you want, and we need to get this childish behavior. And that's what I think Ford was. I thought Ford was being childish. I thought Canoe, when he came back with his, impersonation of the Ronald Reagan TV commercial, was childish. That we are being those kids. We're being the ones saying we're the main character here. You have to do what we want to do. And we've convinced, or somehow most Canadians are convinced that that's true.
There's two possibilities as I see it, Kevin. One is that this is all intentional, that this is part of a different plan that coincides with Carney's book that he wrote, which will bring Canada to its knees. Now, that's a bit conspiratorial, and we see that in some of the comments on Inside Politics. People talk about that. Is that really what's going on? I don't want to be conspiratorial. I don't know if that's the option. To me, it does look amateurish. And you brought up, Kevin, the issue of China. That's where you negotiate the triangulation, because the United States should want us on board, should not want us bringing electric vehicles in from China, should not want that. But if they push too hard, guess what's going to happen? That's what's going to happen. And so that gives us an angle to negotiate, to show allyship, to show strength with the United States, as opposed to continuing to thumb them in the eye. I don't understand it at all. It's so silly. I don't think there's any merit, by the way, in the Ronald Reagan Museum and Library suing for use of what's for that video. It's in the public domain. I don't see any merit in that. They did edit it, but I don't think they have any damages, so I'm not too worried about that. Not that it really matters. But the issue is, how do you approach the problem in a way that helps Canadian families in Canada? And they're doing it all wrong, whether intentionally or just because they're the Timbit League.
I want to get Geoff in on this because I think it's important to get a different view. First and foremost, I don't want Carney to fail. We've all talked about that. I'm not against Carney in any way, shape, or form. I'm against the fact that it doesn't seem like there's any adults in charge. And Geoff had said it before, that who can do that? I don't know, Geoff. You did talk about that before. Could the Pierre go in and do it? Could anybody go in and negotiate? I don't know. But what I do know with all my heart is whoever we have doing it now should be released, and we should get some different people at the table.
Yeah, it's clearly the strategy is not working, and I think we all agree on that. That whatever Canada has been doing hasn't worked. The question is, what would work with with the current U.S. administration? And I don't think any of us have the answer to that question.
But do we not believe that and so many countries jumped at making a deal? Because we all know when the president changes, these trade deals can change. And I'm afraid he's going to walk away from whatever you call it, Kuzma, or however you want to look at that agreement. If he's negotiating with Mexico on their own right now and having good talks, Mexico, remember, Mark Carney went down there and couldn't get an agreement with Mexico, couldn't get a trilateral meeting with the United States that he wanted, and so on. So I just my biggest problem with this is that, because I've been in politics, I've sat in these party and legislature and stuff, is that again, where are the business minds that where they're not coming out and saying, look, doesn't matter what party we're on right now, we need to negotiate this deal today because look at the money that's leaving Canada just from the investment side. Just from the investment side.
Okay, so if you're sitting on the other side of the 49th parallel, what kind of a deal would satisfy the United States right now?
I've got an answer. I've got an answer for you, Geoff. Here's a way to do it. Not the way, but a way to do it. One is you show the Trump administration respect. That's one, instead of what's going on, because he does occupy the presidency. Number two,
it helps if you genuflect when you walk into the office, I guess.
Well, but look what Korea did. Look what Qatar did. You lay out the red carpet. You do all that pomp and circumstance. The British did it. We need to learn from those who've been successful. Number two, you put supply management on the table so that he can win Wisconsin and his party can win Wisconsin and Minnesota and all those areas that produce so much of the dairy and cheese and what have you. Number three, you actually discuss a level of tariffs because he does like tariffs. I agree with Kevin. This is not going to be a forever deal, but a deal for a number of years with a sunset. And you agree to some number of tariffs that can work, that preserves our industries. That seems to me to be a path. And you pose to them the proposition, we could be your best allies, and we should be. We should invest more in NORAD. We should, as we heard a few weeks ago, we should invest more in our defense. We should be in the public stage, not recognizing Palestine, putting, again, another thumb in the eye of American foreign policy, but instead saying, we'll be with you, we'll be another voice for you. Or the alternative is we'll have no choice, but we'll have electric vehicles in from China, et cetera. So you give them those alternatives and you say you want the one with the United States, not against the United States. That's a way to do it. You paint a picture and you show respect.
But that's negotiating 101.
You'd think.
That is, I think in the business part of my life, I have to negotiate with people.
I know.
Every day.
I know.
And that's how you do it, right? You know your audience, as they say, right? If you're a performer, know your audience, a comedian, whatever, know your audience. That's the same with negotiating. And I don't think Canada knows their audience. I think you're right. It's not just a respect for Donald Trump. I want to take the personalities out of this equation.
It's the office.
It's the office, but it's also just a joint respect for our neighbors. They don't have to trade with us. We don't have to trade with them, but let's go in like professionals and let's be adults. But I think politicians, elected officials are using this childish game, and it's going to hurt Canada more than we know. And that's what scares me.
And there's still a market for that. That's the problem. It's because it's not affecting most Canadians. Politicians like Ford, and including Canoe, there's incentives for them to continue to play games, to be tough, to keep their elbows up. It's the wrong thing to do. And by the way, I wouldn't be so sure that this is going to be a temporary situation with the tariffs. Americans are very quickly going to get addicted to the money that they're raking in as a result of these tariffs. It's a lot of money. And the Republican Party, like if it's Vance, J.D. Vance is the next president, he's a true believer in tariffs. I think the Republican Party is basically a protectionist party right now. We should be settling in potentially for a very long run with what's coming out of these negotiations with Trump.
But we can benefit from that too, though, right? We could have our tariff. If we have an equal tariff on both sides, we benefit from that. And I said that a long time ago in these trade negotiations, even before the election. I was saying, I think Donald Trump is trying to have tariffs to replace income tax on certain Americans. Incomes below a certain amount. And he's already talking about that, to take these tariffs to replace these, people that under a certain amount of income paying taxes. But we could do the same thing in Canada. We could use those tariffs to help us as well. But it's about how we negotiate. And I think that's where I struggle the most watching this. Is you're right. I see these leaders like Ford and Canoe and others, and even Carney, when he came out saying we stand ready to go back to the table when the U.S. wants, didn't acknowledge that they have a problem. Didn't acknowledge that, you know what, I hear what they're saying. I'm going to reach out to the president and see if we can fix this. And that would have fixed it.
He doesn't seem too concerned. He doesn't really
No.
betray any urgency, it would be nice if he would, just
Well, wait
a
a second. You guys are all talking about don't negotiate from an emotional standpoint.
Right.
And now you're criticizing Carney because he's not negotiating from an emotional standpoint. So what side of the fence do you want to straddle?
Yeah, I actually don't agree with that, with two things, Royce, that you said. Number one is I think it's not long term because ultimately the president, I mean, Mr. Reagan, was right. Mrs. Thatcher was right. Mr. Mulroney was right. Tariffs don't work long term. So I don't see it as a long term issue. It is a current issue. So a short to medium term issue, and we have to play along to get along. Number two is I don't mind a calm demeanor if underlying it is a successful or any strategy. And this is why I say some of the comments really sort of touch on something interesting. Could this be intentional?
Yes.
Is this actually part of a different plan consistent with Carney's book that wants Canada to fall into scarcity and really essentially a depression with a lot of government control? I don't want to be conspiratorial about this, but it's either that or just a complete ignorance of how to negotiate and pretty basic economic. It's very hard to understand. So anyway, yeah. I hope for the best. And when it comes to Mr. Canoe not understanding basic economics, I think that's genuine. I think he doesn't understand basic economics, and he's sort of surprised when he comes across like an economic tourism. Gee, we can't build roads to the north, but if we could only get a better freshwater port, a better port in Churchill, not freshwater, but
Tidewater.
Right. A better tidewater port there, and then get oil and gas going across an LNG, then maybe we could actually do it. But I'm not going to sit down with Indigenous groups, work that out, and say yes to a corridor.
You know what? But he's an actor, right? He's a TV personality.
That's exactly right.
It's a TV personality, right. And the videos that he does on TikTok, they spend more time on videos for TikTok than they do on solving the problems of Manitoba. But I mean, we have problems all across the country. I want to get back to the main focus, and just for a couple of seconds again, how do we convince Canadians that Americans are not our enemies? It doesn't get the personality and get the ego out of the room. Like I used to always, hear from people that had mentored me, and I always appreciated it was, check your ego at the door when you go in to negotiate. You check your egos at the door. You check your egos and you sit down and you make the best deal possible for both of you at that time. Everyone's going to have to make concessions, and I'm sure the U.S. would make concessions, and Canada's got to make concessions. But my problem is and I'm going to go back to it, is that I don't know if it's necessarily Mark Carney's book that's pushing it, or the fact that he knows we're going to have an election, and he won the last election because of the big bad Grinch being Donald Trump. And I think they're still playing that card. And I think that hurts us with our American trading partners. And I think that he is smart enough to say, okay, I've got to send different people to the table. You don't have to send people that are just going to say yes to everything the United States wants, but different people, different personalities. Maybe that's our problem. And why aren't we doing that? That's my focus of all this.
But Kevin, that's, I guess, the point. 5 years ago, Mr. Carney became Mr. Trudeau's chief economic advisor, or an economic advisor. And then he became prime minister. And it's exactly the same people around the table, right, with one or two exceptions. So what a big surprise. It's the same people, the same axis of ego that exists at the PMO and in Ottawa at a huge cost to Canadian families. And I guess that's the issue, Geoff, for me, is that there are these disasters, whether it's political, in terms of immediate gain for the Liberal Party at the expense of Canadians, or whether it's something else. Rest assured that budget is not going to fix the economic framework of Canada. It's going to add, as Mr. Carney's been doing, layers of bureaucracy and elites making decisions instead of freeing the economy. And that's another level of disaster for Canada, unfortunately.
Geoff, do you think that the trade negotiations are going to be a part of the next election? Like, Royce points out before we started taping the show of a comment on Inside Politics of a lady and her swim club are 100% behind Mark Carney. I don't remember the exact quote, but they were there. You know, she wanted us to know that her entire swim club, senior swim club, is behind Carney. Is it because of the tariff talk? Is it because we have a common enemy? And do you think that's going to carry over to a next election, which could be 2 months away?
Yeah, it's possible. I think it's also, and we've talked about this before, and I've written about this, that the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada is problematic for a lot of Canadian voters, and that plays very much to Mark Carney's strengths. People may not be in love with Mark Carney, but they just don't like Pierre Poilievre. They just don't like him.
And there's a leadership review in January, so
February in Calgary.
So if he,
it's end of January, Geoff.
And end of January. So I think it overlaps there. But
so would he call?
So what's the Conservative Party of Canada going to do, and how do they deal with this? And if they sense an election is on the horizon, as you guys suggest,
not just us now.
Can you? Well, I don't know about everyone, but a lot of people, I guess, are suggesting there's an election on the horizon. Somebody's going to have to vote against this budget in sufficient numbers to bring the government down. Or Carney himself, I guess, could dissolve the House and say that he lacks the confidence in the House, but I think he'd have a tough time getting away with that. Enough members are going to have to vote against this budget to bring the government down. If that happens, the Conservatives are painted into a little bit of a corner because they don't have time between the fall of a government and an election to select a new leader. So they're going to have to go to bat they're going to have to dance with the guy that brung them. And that's Pierre Poilievre. Okay. Can he turn his image around and make himself palatable enough to Canadians? And can he convince Canadians? Can he persuade Canadians and show them the evidence that Mark Carney's strategies have not produced the desired results? Can he do that? I don't know the answer to those questions, but those are the questions that Canadians will have to answer, and the Conservative Party of Canada has to answer for itself.
Royce, I think, can you answer those questions?
Yeah, we have to take a step back here and ask why, if we do go into an election 6 months after the last election, why is that? You know, I wrote about this on my Sun column for coming up this weekend. You know, the idea that we should have an election, it's just more game playing by politicians. It's just another Reagan ad. It's just another Instagram post. The reality is that Mark Carney got a mandate to lead a minority government. It's his responsibility to bring on enough opposition MPs to pass a budget. And the reality is that he is now filling up this budget that's going to come out with poison pills that are going to persuade probably the NDP to vote against it because he wants an election. He knows that things are going to get a lot worse in the years ahead. He thinks that if he can lock in a majority government right now, and also while the NDP doesn't have a leader, which is just really a terrible, sneaky politics to me, he knows that he could be better off in the long term. And so even before we get into an election campaign, we need to ask, why are we having this? Like, in whose best interest is an election right now? It's pretty clear that the Liberals are trying to pull a fast one, I think.
Let me jump in on that one. As a former politician, those discussions actually happen inside caucus rooms. Those discussions around the table are like, oh, this would be a great time for us to secure, the votes. We should go now. That party's down. Or these are the discussions that happen. I went into politics like a child, I guess, thinking, oh, we're going to have discussions about how do we fix the problems that are happening in the province, or how do we fix the problems that are happening in the country, or how do we cut our spending? No. We talk about chess, political chess. How do we take down our opponent? What's the best time to strike that we know we can win and be in office longer? So, Royce, you're absolutely, those are the discussions that are happening. And I'm hearing that, you see little clips here and there of members of parliament for the Liberal Party saying, oh, I don't know if this is going to go through. I don't think the parties are going to take it, and we're going to spend a lot of money on Canadians, but they're not going to support it. That's my problem, is that why can't politicians stop those games and just do their job?
Kevin, your youthful exuberance is appreciated. I've always appreciated it. I still do. It's fantastic. I remember President Reagan saying to Mr. Mondale, I won't use your youth against you, and we won't against you. But let's go back in history a little bit. Speaking of old times, when Mr. Harper had a minority government, he went to every leader, every party to say, how can we work it out? How can we make a budget pass? What can we do? What's the horse trading? Mr. Carney isn't doing that. The NDP have said he's not doing that. The Bloc have said he's not doing that. And frankly, the Conservatives have said the same thing. So he's not really doing that. I think that the Liberals will be able to count on Ms. May to support them. And as we said last week, it really boils down to the NDP, who are in complete disarray financially, in complete disarray because they don't have a leader. But as I think, Kevin, you said, or maybe Royce said, I don't remember, or maybe it was you, Geoff, that if they focus on just a few seats holding their own, then maybe they might actually get party status, which would help float their boat a little bit. But it's really remarkable that Mr. Carney is, it seems to be, that he's operating to bring down his own government while trying to portray it falsely as the opposition doing that. And that's not actually the case. In terms of the Conservative Party, Geoff, there is no substantive movement against Mr. Poilievre. There's lots of support for Mr. Poilievre. And if you judge leadership by who's espousing positions that are correct, Mr. Poilievre not only should be the leader of the party, but the Prime Minister of Canada. And I'm a person guy, not a party guy. So it just happens he's right. If the NDP happened to be right on the economy, I'd be rah-rah for them. They're not. The Liberals are not. Mr. Poilievre is, and he's been for some time now.
So
no, we all know that that's not what decides elections.
That's also true.
That is not, as Kevin talked about, that the currency of political parties is votes.
Yeah,
and votes are not cast based on the fine print of economic policies. They just aren't. Stephen Harper, who I think was an extremely capable prime minister, won because he was not because Canadians liked him, but because they disliked the alternatives more.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
That's the problem that Pierre Poilievre faces right now.
Yeah,
that the last election was his to lose, and he lost it. That's a problem.
Yeah. So that's true. And I think back also to Mrs. Thatcher. Nobody liked Mrs. Thatcher, but they knew her economic policies were right. They knew she had a strong spine and moral fiber, and they hated what the Labour Party had done to the United Kingdom. And the question is, are Canadians even close to that point? I don't think we are. I wish we were, because we need to be, because the shoe is going to fall, and it's going to fall on Canadian families.
Yeah, the problem for Pierre is there's still a lot of Audreys with their seniors synchronized swimming teams out there that haven't felt the pain of Carney's failure to get a deal, and so they'll still vote for the Liberals. But I mean, Poilievre, the party, this is a party decision. It's an internal decision. Pierre is very popular inside the party, notwithstanding the result in the last election. And as Lawrence said, there's really no movement to get rid of him. This is a guy, remember, leaders have different roles. They have to win elections, but they also have to kind of tend to their party. And Pierre is very good at that. He's popular within the party. There's no way he's going to get too few votes to survive as leader at that convention, I think.
I just want adults in charge, and I want everyone to start acting like adults.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegssun.com for more.